Okay, this is the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of February 10th. It is now 7:10 p.m. This is Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. We have on the phone Carrie, Sheila, Helene, Joanne, and Steve, members of the Affordable Housing Committee. We also have with us Representatives Laura Devlin, Jen Leeper, and Kristen McCarthy-Vahey. And I believe we have also several members of the public on the line as well. So, Steve, I'll let you turn things over to you at this point.
Thank you, Mark. First of all, just to alert members of the public, because of the format, not able to ask questions in real time. They can send emails, and we can respond as best we can tonight or tomorrow. The agenda had to call to order, then the minutes, but I just want to skip right down to members of the state legislative delegation so we can deal with them while we have them. And Mark, what do you think? Should we tick off some of the stuff that we've done and then and discuss them, or ask our reps to tell us what's happening up in Hartford? Which do you think is first to start with?
Well, I think hopefully everyone on the call is aware of the fact that the Board of Selectmen did authorize the Affordable Housing Committee to update the town's affordable housing plan, which was last done in 2014. And the committee has started work on that in conjunction with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is also in the process of updating the plan of conservation development. And I think, in the interest of time, and I know that some of the representatives have other commitments this evening, and again, I do apologize for the technical difficulties we're having with the meeting, but I think it might be best to hear any thoughts that they may have to offer in terms of what's going on up in Hartford, and any other thoughts that they have or insights they'd like to share as it relates to this topic. So
Mark, I agree then, except I just wanted to mention that Planning and Zoning did approve the accessory dwelling unit amendments last night, which I think is a great step forward.
Absolutely.
And with that, so Laura, Jennifer, Kristen, I don't know how you want to start the discussion. If one of you wants to raise their hand and go first, or how you want to do it. I'll leave it up to the three of you.
Well, if I may, Steve, this is Kristen.
Yeah.
Laura and Jen, do you two mind if I jump in first? Not at all.
Chair of Planning and Development, that's appropriate.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, Steve and the members of the Affordable Housing Committee, thank you so much for having us here. And Steve and Mark, I want to give a shout out to the two of you from my days many years ago as an RTM member. The two of you have been working diligently on this issue for our town against some strong headwinds at times, and I just want to thank you for your efforts. I know, as I often say, there's always room for improvement, and we have ways to go in terms of addressing all these issues, but I just appreciate your commitment over time. I want to preface my remarks with an apology that I am not going to be able to stay tonight. Probably many members of the public are aware that we had a terrible tragedy at Willard High School, and there's a parent meeting tonight. And as a mom, a parent, and co-chair of Fairfield Cares, going to be jumping off a little sooner than I might have liked to join that, to be able to provide support at home and within the community in that way. And I would ask your forgiveness, and also offer if I was welcome to come back again at your next meeting perhaps. But just really briefly in terms of where things stand in Hartford right now, the committees are working through all the bills that have been proposed. I think over 2,000 bills get proposed, and in the end, In even the best of sessions, only about 250 or so get passed, and I suspect that will be even less so. So it's kind of a filtering process. And what happens is our committees, we call it raise bills or vote to have hearings on bills. And there are many bills that get heard. And right now, within the two committees that most impact the work of the Affordable Housing Committee, well, two of the committees, I should say. Actually, there are others, but the Planning and Development Committee has cognizance over issues related to zoning, and the Housing Committee has cognizance over housing. And you might ask, how is that separate? And it's a good question, because many years ago they were one committee, they were together, but currently the Housing Committee is the committee that has cognizance and normally hears issues related to 830G, which is what we talk about a lot in our community. And the Planning and Development Committee has issues, has cognizance over the issues related to zoning. And as the co-chair of the Planning and Development Committee, what I can tell you at this point in time is that there are a number of proposals that have been put forward. And as a chair, my job is to help make sure that we hear those. Not that I necessarily agree with all of them. I want to be very clear about that so that we can facilitate a conversation and then negotiate what's really in the best interest of the communities around the state. As I often say, I represent the 133rd District, and I'm a state representative, and part of my job as the chair is to facilitate both of those things. So there are a number of proposals on the table right now. The Connecticut Realtors have brought forward proposals. A group called Home Connecticut has brought forward proposals. A group which I think a lot of people have been talking about, Desegregate Connecticut, has brought forward proposals, as well as others. And right now we're working together. Senator Wong is the ranking member. I don't know if he's able to join. He is part
I
of
have just gotten on. I've just gotten on and heard your very good presentation, and thank you, Kristen, if I may. This is an example of the world we're living in, right? The Zoom world.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So I'll leave it there. I know that there are a lot of questions. In fact, if with your indulgence, if I'm able to return next month and have the opportunity, I'd be able to tell you a little bit more about what specific bills are going to be up for a hearing, and then we can talk more specifically about that. And as Senator Wong and I spent a few hours together today going through some of the proposals and bills that we have in the committee, and we expect that the zoning-related proposals are not going to be in hearing until, Senator Wong knows I'm pulling out my handy-dandy calendar, I think not until mid-March, most likely. So I've talked long enough. I just want to thank all of you for your work, and I would love to remain in conversation with all of you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
And Tony, before you hopped on, we mentioned two things. This is Steve, Tony. One is that we are updating our affordable housing plan and working in conjunction with the Planning and Zoning Department and Commission, number one. And number two, last night, Planning and Zoning approved the accessory dwelling unit changes to the regulations. And then I turned it over to our legislative delegation to let you guys decide who wanted to speak first, and Kristen did. And so now the floor is open back to Jennifer, Laura, and Tony.
Jeff,
am I the only one on the phone, or is everybody on the phone?
Yeah, everyone's on the phone, Tony.
I think everyone's on the phone.
Yep.
I'd be happy to follow up and update as it relates to zoning and the affordable housing. And Kristen has indeed done a wonderful job in kind of prefacing the work that we're doing. But far more important is to understand that Fairfield is very lucky to have two legislators that are serving in that capacity and a bipartisan basis. I hope to look at that. I mean, I've spent 6 years in housing as the ranking member, which constitutes the minority party leader in those committees, and 2 of those years as tri-chair, where with First Selectwoman Kupchak, we made a revision to the formula for the 830G legislation. In fact, the only bill that overrode Governor Malloy's veto. That being said, I'm having the opportunity to work with Representative McCarthy-Vahey as the ranking member in planning development, which indeed has cognizance over zoning and municipal policies. And 8-2 is the statute in regards to local zoning board and planning boards. And we're going to have many conversations, but it's not only on P&Z that the issue of affordable housing has appeared in bills. There are bills appearing in housing, as mentioned. There are bills appearing in finance, of all places, as a committee, in which Senator Looney, who is the president of the Senate, has proposed a bill that for towns that do not meet the 10% moratorium, not only do they have to accommodate 830G applications, but they are looking at a special property tax assessment that would be allocated to different municipal communities. So there are many communities. There's another bill afoot that's happening relating to transit-oriented development zones, looking at transit nearby authorities within I believe a 5-mile or a mile radius, I apologize, that no local zoning and regulations need not apply. So the TOD
Tony,
consideration and the expansion of that. Half mile, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm looking at the statute right there. So it's a half-mile TOD. So that's another point of consideration. But I do want to compliment that some of the proposals that have been raised in the state, the town of Fairfield has done a terrific job. Your housing authority has done a terrific job in the area of Carroll Martin, but also you as members of this task force have done a good job in regards to your 5-year reports, some of the guidance that you've provided. It really is something that is a tremendous source of pride that up in Hartford we can articulate some of the viewpoints. And we do have to counter some of the viewpoints that's promoted by different organizations that cast on race and exclusion that might have occurred historically, but I will share with you, as a representative of Fairfield, I speak very passionately and opposing those viewpoints because I know Fairfield as a town has done a tremendous job in addressing affordable housing by the properties that we've been able to create, from Parish Court to Sullivan McKinney to Pine Tree and various other organizations. But unfortunately, we don't get the credit under the 830G statute because they were all pre-1990. The other factor that is a huge consideration right now is the statutory impact of 830G and the requirements that may override some of the tools that our planning and zoning boards may have on a local control basis that will impact future proposals. We have one right now on Mill Hill Terrace, as well as other potential properties that, and the recently concluded one on 131 Beach Road. We are a town that's under tremendous pressure in regards to the impact of affordable housing and 830G applications. So I really appreciate the work that you all have done, and I am very excited that Representative McCarthy-Vahey and I will be able to work together on behalf of Fairfield and work closely with you as a body to make sure that Fairfield's interests are served and the community gets represented in the legislative discussions. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. If you guys have like 2,000 bills that get introduced, there has to be 3 or 5 that are sort of at the top, and it would be helpful if we could get maybe a brief summary of some of the more important ones. Tony, you did mention that there may be a tax that someone has proposed in addition to the 830G. Is it possible to summarize a couple of the other major bills that you expect will make some headway?
We will be happy to offer that. I know Representative McCarthy-Vahey, as the chair of the committee, we have raised some concepts that will be flushed out with language, and I can assure you as soon as we get that language, I will be coming to you to get your thoughts and guidance as we move forward. But there are many issues floating around. I think first and foremost is having these kind of conversations with your legislators to be sure that transparency and information is available to you to get your input as we move forward.
Thank you.
And if I may jump in, I'm toggling here, but Senator Wong is right. We have, just from a process standpoint, so folks know, as those concepts and titles are raised, we vote on them as a committee. And then in our committee in Planning and Development this year, this isn't true in all of them, the bills get fully drafted before they go to a hearing. And the hearing agenda has to be posted 5 days prior to the public hearing. We've had one public hearing in Planning and Development, which is not primarily we didn't have much in the way of zoning issues at all. But the next hearing is scheduled for the February, oh my goodness, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong calendar, February the 19th, which, again, 5 days prior to that, you can look on the Connecticut General Assembly website and follow what's called the bulletin. And this is true for all bills, but we will remain in touch with you about that. As Senator Wong said, there are a lot of different proposals out there. And as I mentioned, as chairs, we work together, actually. The chairs and ranking members, we meet together to agree on the bills that we're willing to raise. It doesn't mean we all agree on those bills. It means we all agree that we'll hear them and listen to what they have to say. But there are certainly some that will make some pretty good headlines, which I don't expect will actually go anywhere.
Thank you. Mark, do you have anything you want to add or ask regarding those?
No, I just would maybe give Laura Devlin an opportunity to chime in, and then Jen Leeper after that. That'd be okay.
Can you guys hear me
if they have
okay?
anything to add. Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Super. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to join the meeting today. I appreciate it very much. And I think Tony and Kristen gave you a good overview of sort of the current process. On a broader scope, the governor unveiled his budget today, and you can find all of that online. And it will start in the deep process, I think it's next Friday, with appropriations. But from your purview in terms of affordable housing and things related to zoning and housing, there was one broad agenda, and I think it's worth sharing, that was spearheaded by a particular senator. It sort of disappeared off of the system since it was drafted last year, and it really does outline the agenda of Desegregate Connecticut. I had the opportunity to meet with one of their members yesterday to take me through some of their thoughts, and so I'll come back to that in a minute. But this piece of legislation is really sort of a composite of what we're seeing now as one-off pieces of legislation, and it all seems to come from this. What I shared with the individual that I met with yesterday is that a lot of, what they're trying to do, I applaud. Diversity of housing is big. When I moved to Fairfield as a single individual, and I was 28 years old, I didn't want to buy a single-family house, but there wasn't any other options within the community, so I ended up buying a single-family house. So the notion of having a diverse housing stock is great, and I think it's something that our community has come a long way. The difference in in our conversation, he used a word which was to enable municipalities, and to me that is the key. there seems to be a real effort through many of these pieces of legislation to shift the control from home rule to, Hartford-driven dictates on how towns will operate. I think that the work that they have done is very positive in many respects and could be a good resource for communities. But I think something that we need to be aware of is the shift in, decision-making and control away from local control into state control. And I'm sure with our half of our delegation on planning and development, there'll be an opportunity to, share and make sure people are aware of legislation as it moves forward, because it's going to be really important. And people need to understand the details. The devil's always in the details, and what it would mean. But also, I hope it does turn out to be a good resource for all of our communities to be able to benefit from.
And this is Steve. Let me ask you, Laura, if Desegregate Connecticut, they have this 7-point agenda, and some of them are really positive ideas. But if these ideas made it into law, do they come with any money? Is there any budgetary assistance, or does the town lose some home rule and lose some money along with it?
And Tony and Tony and Kristen may be able to chime in on this. I think it's gone, what I've heard are two ways, right? One is your town won't get any money unless you do X, Y, Z. And that's probably more so. It's a lot more stick than carrot, per se. So there's definitely financial implications from what I understand, both from an education perspective. Sure. A couple things. There are, as I mentioned before, there are a few proposals on the table. One of them is from Home Connecticut, and that's been an effort that's been underway over a period of probably 4 or 5 years. It's been before the legislature, and the 8-2 statute that Senator Wong talked about is the lawyers, the Bar Association lawyers, what they call that is actually the zoning enabling statute. So it is, in fact, the state provides power to the municipalities through that statute. That's how the lawyers talk about it. And as Representative Devlin said, it's absolutely true. There are a lot of details in those zoning statutes. Some of the efforts around that group have been to reorganize the statute and clarify and proactively promote municipal efforts. There isn't anything currently that I'm aware of that is contemplating the kind of withdrawal of funds. There were in years past conversations related to that, and there certainly are people who have ideas about that. But as far as I'm aware, neither the Home Connecticut nor the Realtors nor the Desegregate Connecticut, which are three of the kind of bigger proposals that have been put forward, have anything that would punish a community in that kind of monetary way. And in addition, a lot of the zoning changes there's no direct state budget impact to municipal aid that I'm aware of.
If I may, and I do want to very much hear Jennifer, and welcome to the dialogue, but I do want to clarify there's maybe a contrasting difference with Representative McCarthy-Vahey's statement. For me, I do not believe that the state has the ultimate authority in the enabling of local zoning. I refer back to a statutory language that relates to home rule that allows local communities, local zoning boards, municipalities on the issue of home rule. And we will have a much deeper discussion about that, because that is a major theme in the sense that does the state have ultimate authority in enabling local municipalities' decision-making, or do each local municipality have the ability of home rule and collaborating with the state? Now, obviously, the state can have that carrot or the stick in regards to finance, and I still need to read through the details of the governor's budget, but he has initiated some of that carrot or stick mentality in regards to efforts, and maybe not in zoning, but he's certainly doing that in education. And I think there may be a evolution to look at housing, which he's placed as a priority, and I support that. But I'm not so sure about the way he's going about it. But ultimately, I do believe for us to solve the problem at hand, I do believe there's a problem. But I think for us to solve that, you need to have total collaboration between federal, state, and local. But it has to be the local having input and some control over that decision-making. So that may be a fundamental difference between Representative McCarthy-Vahey and I from a standpoint of the state enabling powers versus local control and home rule.
Thank you, Tony. So, Jennifer, would you like to add a few comments?
I will try to be brief. Thank you so much for having me. And I am excited to learn more about the new plan that you guys are working on and an update on our progress toward the moratorium. As Senator Wong referenced, there is a development, the 461 Mill Hill Terrace, where many, many neighbors are very concerned, and I was just speaking with a group of them earlier today, and I shared with them that I'm working with the vice chair of the Housing Committee to try to give a hearing to 830G and an evaluation on the effectiveness of it and whether or not it has achieved its goals over the past 30 years. And so we're working on that. But I am not on a housing committee. I serve on the Aging Committee, Commerce Committee, and Education Committee. And so from that perspective, I'm thrilled to hear about the passage of the accessory dwelling units here in Fairfield. And I will leave it at that, as I know there is also a full agenda.
Thank you. Mark, do you want to mention anything about Quincy and the possible waiver that we might like to get from DOH to ECD?
Sure. There's a couple issues that maybe have some state resonance at the state level in terms of policy making, but with regard to Quincy Street, I think probably all of the state legislative delegation is aware of the fact that the town many years ago had an opportunity to purchase property from the U.S. government of Reef Road, which was at the time used to provide military or housing for military families, military personnel and their dependent families. So we did purchase that. It was essentially subdivided and used as is for affordable home ownership. Unfortunately, the property does sit in a flood zone, and we did have some impacts associated with Superstorm Sandy, which didn't cause major damage to the structures themselves, but there has been a corresponding increase in flood insurance premiums, such that long-term there's some questions as to the sustainability of the existing affordable home ownership units. So we've been working with the homeowners there to develop a plan whereby the town would repurchase the existing lots, tear them down and build new at the correct flood elevation, and in the process add additional affordable home ownership units there. One of the issues from a state policy perspective is that typically the Department of Housing will participate financially in a project if it actually adds affordable housing units. Not surprisingly, they want to increase the affordable housing inventory. Conversely, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection doesn't want to encourage development in a floodplain for obvious reasons. So we have competing public policy goals, and in the past we've asked the Department of Housing for a waiver to allow for us to do additional affordable housing in this area. And as you know, Fairfield is a very desirable community in which to live. So we thought that would be a good investment on the part of the state. Under the previous administration, that was not granted, and we are now hopeful with this administration that we might be able to reconsider that decision. So I have talked to the Commissioner of Housing. She is very interested in participating in some fashion, helping us to meet our affordable housing goals. But I'm certainly willing to follow up with each of you and provide more details when we get to that point. And of course, we would welcome any support from all of you so that we might be able to, again, get some financing to help us meet our affordable housing goals in that area.
Mark, that is a great idea, and I'm familiar with the property, having walked it many times and met some of the homeowners. How many units are in question right now, and how many could you add to that unit? And that's the first question. And the second question is, would those new units be counted as post-1990 and add to our moratorium?
Well, I'll take that question first. Yes, they would add to our inventory for moratorium points because they would be newly deed restricted and constructed after 1990. Even the units that after we purchased them from the U.S. government, once we deed restricted them in the 2000s, they did meet that criteria.
Awesome.
We do have a total of 22 existing affordable home ownership units there. Our plan is to work with willing property owners and try to aggregate 5 or 6 lots at a time and do this as part of a phased development. So I think we already have purchased one. We have contract offers out for 2 more, and there are 2 more that are pending. So our initial plan is to acquire 5 lots that are contiguous to one another, equaling about an acre. And with those 5 units, we would essentially do a 3-for-1 replacement. So we would create a triplex or a 3-unit development in lieu of the single-family dwelling that's currently there. They would be still fairly modest units, maybe a combination. The existing ones are 3-bedroom, and these might be a combination of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. So the plan is to do 3 units in lieu of 1. So instead of 5, we would have 15 on a 1-acre piece, which is consistent with our zoning for that area for an overlay zone. So that's the plan.
And would it be run by the Fairfield Housing Authority? Because right now these 22 units, as I understand it, are individual owners, right?
Yes. So
with a special kind of consideration.
Yeah. So our plan would be to retain ownership of the underlying land in some type of land trust as a condominium development. So we would still be home ownership units, but there would be common ownership of some of the assets. But the town would retain ownership of the underlying land and ground lease them to the individuals. So it's similar to what we did on Nordstrom and Greenfield Street, but it will work best as a condominium. We haven't selected a development partner with which to work with. The housing authority would be one possibility, but there are others that we might be able to partner with.
And Mark, let me add that I think in the last 10 years, there's not a community in the state that has done as many things as Fairfield has done to further the affordable housing goals. And one of the things that we've done that applies here with Quincy is we have the Housing Trust Fund, and some of those dollars were used for the first house that was purchased and will be used as we go forward. And so the town is really reaching into its own pocket to do as best as it can to further these goals. But we do need assistance from the state and or the feds in order to get this done.
May I respond, Steve, to that?
Sure.
I think you're absolutely correct. Without federal dollars and significant state dollars, it's very difficult to meet some of these needs that we have. And so, when we think about housing policy, as I've certainly learned more in my time, I haven't served on the housing committee, and like I said before, planning and development has a connection, but it's not as directly in the weeds, so to speak. But there's the market-based aspect of it, which is where we get into some of the struggles around things like 830G, and then the clear need for really significant funding, which, if it's not the market, it's taxpayer-based, and so that's really something that is a balance. I did also just want to follow up 2 things, Mark. Please do. I think I would echo what Senator Wong said in terms of, and we've talked about this before, anything that we can possibly do to help convince the commissioner that this is a really worthy and important project for our community. I think we all would really want to be able to do that. And then just to follow up, when we're talking about the zoning again, I don't mean to be beating a dead horse, but when I use the term enabling, it's not about my personal perception. It's simply I was sharing how the lawyers refer to that language. And I think all of these pieces, the funding piece, the local efforts, the zoning pieces, it's so many different tools that we have to come up with to help all of you who are our Affordable Housing Committee be able to address, this crisis. I had an opportunity today to participate in a White House briefing call, believe it or not, and one of the stats that was shared, 2 stats that were shared were kind of stunning and won't be surprising to your group, that 1 in 5 renters in our country are behind on rent, and 1 in 10 homeowners have missed payments, with 1 in 7 people having trouble putting food on the table. So you all have, and we all together have, a big job ahead of us.
Thank you, Kristen. And yes, and that has gotten some play in the press about the renters who are behind, or the homeowners. And to me, that's a looming crisis that is going to hit us sooner than I would like. But Mark, what do you think? What's next?
The only other thing, and I don't want to monopolize, so if there's other members of the committee that would like to ask members of our delegation any questions before they have to go, but there is one other thing that I do want to highlight, not to be too controversial, but we just mentioned the accessory dwelling units and the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission did approve some textual changes that Fairfield Senior Advocates and the Affordable Housing Committee and Fair Plan had advocated on behalf of. So that's great news. One of the things that came up during that conversation was there is some difference of opinion as to whether or not accessory dwelling units would potentially count towards a moratorium with a 10-year deed restriction. There is language in the statute that indicates that accessory dwelling units can count towards the town's overall inventory of affordable housing units with a 10-year restriction in place. It's not so clear in the latter part of the statute when it refers to a moratorium, and in that case, there is no specific language as it relates to accessory dwelling units. So the State Department of Housing's interpretation is that ADUs would only count towards moratorium points if those units were restricted for a period of not less than 40 years, which is it's difficult to achieve. It would be difficult to achieve a 10-year restriction, let alone a 40-year restriction. But it's not a matter of settled law, and there was a case previously that was brought by another community that was never fully adjudicated. So it is a somewhat vague section of the statute. I don't know if there might be opportunities to clarify that in some fashion. Of course, when you do that, sometimes that may come back to bite us, but I did want to raise that as an issue as well.
And Mark, when you say the DOH opinion, is it the department or is it one individual within the department that has opined on that?
Well, it is definitely the opinion of one individual within a department, but it was the department's position as it relates to an application that was made by another community. In the end, that community was granted a provisional moratorium, and the AG's office never rendered an opinion as to the validity of that. So take that for what it is.
Brian,
I'd
love to work with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think ADUs is one of the components that we're looking at in housing and P&D, and it is a trend that a lot of other towns have taken, and I've always kind of thought they were keen on the 40-year, de-restriction on that. But that being said, I think we have to be careful with that. I've already gotten some pushback on a statewide ADU relative to smaller towns that don't have that kind of capacity. So I think you raise a very, very important question, and hopefully I'll be able to, with Representative McCarthy-Vahey, try to get you some answers on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, I would love to work with you on this, and I know we've talked about it before. I think it's especially in light of some of the broader conversations that we'll be having. I think we'll be looking to you, especially in the Zoom world, to testify and help craft some things as well, for sure.
And hopefully somebody else will be responsible for actually organizing the Zoom call so that we won't have these technical difficulties.
Mark, I just wanted to add one other thing, that Desegregate Connecticut has one of their goals is accessory dwelling units being more readily available. But what is really key in their proposal is that if an ADU unit is created, it does not add to the denominator of the overall moratorium calculations. And I think that is really helpful if we could have the ADU units not add to our total, quote, supply of housing units in the denominator basis. Because if it's in there, in the denominator, not the numerator, it makes it more difficult for us to get to both the moratorium and the 10%.
We've agreed completely. This is Kristen.
We've got the Housing Trust Fund. We just say a word about that for a second. We're about soon, I hope, to release a NOFA, a Notice of Fund Availability, or a similar publication to let folks know that the trust fund has some dollars, and we would like to have people submit their ideas as to how they might make use of them. Maybe, Mark, you want to add a couple words to that?
Well, again, I think the delegation, and certainly the committee, is aware that we did establish a housing trust fund through ordinance by the RTM, and we've also have an inclusionary zoning fee that provides a direct funding stream. It's a supplemental building permit fee. It has raised $750,000, upwards of that to date. I think we currently have a balance. I didn't check today, but we had a balance over $500,000, and we were expecting some additional inflow because Fairfield U just put in a permit application for their new Alumni Hall Convocation Center, which is a big project. So in any event, it does provide another funding stream to help finance some of these affordable housing developments. So we do have an application packet that we put together thanks to Sheila and her subcommittee, and I have circulated that amongst some housing developers that we work with, including Carol Martin and Carla Miklos, among others. and invited their comments before we finalized it, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But as you said, we're making good progress here, and we'll put that out soon so that others who might have project ideas can then make application to the town to help us to consider funding those projects.
And Mark, you mentioned in Sheila, so I'd like to ask if Sheila or Cindy or Helene, Joanne, Carrie, if you guys have any questions you want to ask or comments you want to add.
This is Cindy. No, I think it's just been a very interesting conversation. I'm glad to know what the legislature is doing, and I'm glad that we've had an opportunity to let you know how much the committee has done. There has, even though there was COVID, we have gotten a lot done. So I'm glad that we got the opportunity to share that with you.
If nobody else wants to jump in, Mark, can you just real quickly give everybody an update on the moratorium points? I know it's part of the handout, but if you could let the folks know just on gross numbers and maybe when we might cross that finish line.
Well, as we're all painfully aware, we only get credit for these points once the units are built and occupied. So there's a certificate of occupancy issued for new developments. If you're newly restricting a property, an existing unit, you're entering into a covenant, restrictive covenant, you get credit for it upon execution of that deed restriction. So at present time, we have an estimated 377 points toward the 433 points that we would need to achieve a moratorium. Now, it does get a little easier thanks to Tony and Brenda and our other members' efforts with the subsequent moratorium. And I think we're actually in good position. Once we get the first one, we'll be well on our way to a second one. So, but we got to get to the first one first. There are some projects in the hopper. You'll be interested to know, I think I forwarded the marketing packet, the application packet for the Anchorage, which is at 333 Uncle Road, which is an inclusionary zoning unit. So they're beginning lease up at the current time. And we have several other projects that are ready to break ground come spring, including 528 Blackrock Turnpike and 78 Uncle Road, both of which are set-aside developments under 830G. So the unfortunate thing is we're making good progress. We've got a lot of projects in the pipeline, but we have to wait until they're actually built. And, even construction is typically a 12 to 15 to 16 month construction window before we actually see a C of O. So I would still estimate we're probably at least a year away from actually having sufficient points to prepare and file a moratorium application with the state. There is a few other projects I do want to mention. One is 15 Uncla Road. I think for those of you who tuned into the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last night, it was referred to a public hearing. It's a mixed-use project, which would be subject to our inclusionary zoning regs for 15 Uncla Road downtown. This is a building that currently houses Las Vidas Lounge, just to orient you. And they're proposing a 4-story building with 2 floors of residential units, primarily efficiencies and 1 bedrooms, with ground floor retail and a 2nd floor office space. And then we also just recently had filed for code review yet another set-aside development proposed for 83 Castle Avenue, which also appears on your list, which is a 44-unit development over in the Kings Highway area. So, again, there is, as Senator Wong mentioned, we do continue to see a lot of projects being proposed under 830G. Last night they started a public hearing. This is Planning and Zoning started the public hearing for set-aside development 830G project on the plant factory site on Blackrock Turnpike. So there's quite a few projects in the hopper, but unfortunately, the way it's structured, we're still some time away from having crossed the magic threshold.
And Mark, you mentioned
15
Umpqua.
Yeah.
Could you clarify how many stories is proposed? It's a 2-story building now, right?
15 Umpqua is a 2-story building, and they're proposing a 4-story building, I believe. They are proposing underground parking and parking on the first floor with retail wrapping around it. And then second floor office space, and then 2 floors of residential above. So it's probably a little bit more intensive for that site than we would like. It's not a bad concept to do mixed use in the downtown area, but part of the reason why they originally had proposed 3 floors of residential and they converted 1 to office was to address some of the parking concerns that we had for the site originally. So, but that just got referred to a public hearing, so we're not quite there yet.
Mark, you said it's 4 stories, you said, and everything around it is basically 1 or 2. Is that correct?
2 or 2.5. I mean, the one thing that you should know about the downtown central business district is that on our existing regulations, we allow 5 stories or 50 feet. So you do have 5-story buildings downtown. 140 Sherman Street, for example, is in the central business district, and it's 5 stories, 50 feet. We had actually gone through a planning study. Planning and Zoning had gone through a planning study for TOD development and had proposed to adjust that to allow for a higher height in terms of feet, but hold the stories to 4 or 5 at the most. So, but they haven't actually enacted that regulation amendment yet.
Okay,
Mark, the new marquee.
Yes.
Mark, if I may, I actually had a couple of questions, and maybe you, Steve, and the commission could educate me on that I had a question on. The plant factory site, what are they? How many units are they looking to build, and how high?
The plant factory site is a 94-unit development, I believe, on that site. If I'm
I think you're right. Yeah.
Reading, and it would be again probably, and I'm going from memory here. I believe it's a 4-story building, but the site was previously approved for a 25,000 square foot medical office. Didn't have any. I mean, despite efforts, I guess they weren't able to close the deal, so they've now retooled and resubmitted for an apartment building under 830G in that area.
Yeah, because I know the property area, there's certain watershed problems, runoff with that kind of density. It all falls down.
Yeah, Yep, it does. And this is confined to the commercial strip along the Blackrock Turnpike, so they're leaving, for the time being, leaving untouched the upper portion of the site, which is much bigger, but has wetlands.
So thank you for that. The second thing is the Bronson Road project. It's, for those people that aren't familiar, this is a project that was rejected by the town's P&Z for public safety considerations of traffic. The developer appealed and 1. So he's gotten the approval, but it's been some lag time, and he doesn't look like he's building anytime soon. But obviously with the PBS program, he's become the poster child of saying that the town squeezed him and et cetera. Can you give me an update where we are as a town on the Bronson Road project? And Jen, if you're not familiar, it is where the entrance ramp right off Bronson Road, that little sliver of land toward the railroad tracks, and that tract of land, right? So you're familiar with it, right?
Yep.
So how many units are they looking to put in there?
91 is what I have listed. I believe that was a slight reduction from what was originally proposed in order to accommodate fire apparatus turnaround. It wasn't sufficient for the Planning and Zoning Commission at the time, which is the reason why they took an appeal of the decision, or denied it, and then it went to appeal. And then, as you said, the court ultimately, it did find some grounds for the commission to question the adequacy of fire turnaround and the like, access and the like. Ultimately sided with the developer, but it has been some time since that decision came down, and there is absolutely nothing that is preventing him from filing for a building permit application and moving ahead with the project. And that's been that way for more than a year, as I understand it. He has recently filed, this is the developer, has filed a contempt citation, or brought a case against the Planning and Zoning Commission. But that, again, doesn't preclude him from making an application for a building permit and starting construction. So I agree with you.
There's something fishy going on, and he's going on a PR campaign. So it is obviously something that is dangerous. And the third, if I may, is obviously down by Commerce Road, Traymark, and the recent developments there have been, clearly evident, but none of those are any set-asides or filed under an 830G, and further other residential developments along Metro Center aren't. I don't know any of them has 830G applications. And in conjunction to that, what are we doing from a standpoint of a mixed use at the Metro Center? Have we moved on from the Tri-Party and Blackrock? I know there's a new set of owners. Can you update for me where we are on the Metro Center and the possible mixed use development there?
Well, that's a good observation, Senator Wong. I think one of the things that the state has certainly encouraged transit-oriented development, encouraged communities to provide for higher density housing in areas where the infrastructure is in place to support that level of density, especially around transit nodes. And the town has done exactly that by revising its zoning regulations to allow for up to 50 bedrooms an acre, and I think we're under consideration now for increasing that to 75 bedrooms per acre in these TOD overlay districts, particularly around Fairfield Metro. And so you see evidence of that, and all those projects are at that level of density, but do provide for some level of affordability. It's currently subject to our inclusionary zoning regulations, which at the time was 10%, and now with Fairfield Metro was increased to 12.5% as a condition of its approval. So it was approved, the Fairfield Metro Center site. They did submit a revised master plan for that location, and it was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. One of the conditions they imposed was to increase the affordable set-aside from 10% to 12.5%, and they approved 357 residential units as part of an overall mixed-use development plan for the site, to include a hotel and office and a small amount of retail space. And I've talked to the developer. The intent is to begin construction this spring, at least with respect to the first phase, although the Planning and Zoning Commission also conditioned their approval on linking the residential development to commercial development, specifically the hotel, which is a little bit up in the air at the moment given the impact of the pandemic on the hotel and hospitality industry.
But are any of those units, affordable housing de-restricted,
yes.
set aside?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yes.
great. Okay.
Yes. Yes. All the trademark, both phases of trademark are subject to the inclusionary zoning regulation that requires 10%, not less than 10%, to be set aside as affordable. So we do have deed restrictions in place for those units.
Struggled retaining commercial business, but are they successful in occupancy so that this will be a thriving, complex?
Very.
Oh, good.
Very.
Good.
They on the second phase, which just got their provisional CO, they were at 50% occupancy within a month. So the residential units are certainly leasing up quickly. As you said, the commercial space was always going to be a lag there because there really isn't a neighborhood to speak of at the moment. But we hope that's going to change. I think you're aware that Sally's Pizza is taking the former Barbacoa space in the former trademark building, so that'll certainly help.
Sally's Pizza from New Haven?
Some New Haven. So we have Pepe's on one end and Sally's on the other,
Wow.
I told them we need the Italian ice place, and I'll be all set.
Yeah.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Jen Leeper. Is upping our inclusionary zone percentage something that the committee is considering going forward? I've been in conversations with Westport, and they have mentioned, and their chair of their TBZ has mentioned that they've had quite a bit of success with a 20% inclusionary zone.
Yeah, we have actually, with the Fairfield Metro, for example, we had proposed increasing it to at least 15%. The commission wasn't persuaded to go that high. There is no offset, so we're not compensating the developer for this. So he has to make it up for the sale or rental of the market rate units. So there is some discussion about what's the appropriate equilibrium point where the project still makes financial sense for the developer to go forward with the project, but there's sufficient equity to provide for the affordable units. The committee thinks that 15% is reasonable. So we're going to continue to push that. I don't know if it works. It depends how inclusionary zoning requirements are set up. Ours applies town-wide for any development that creates 10 or more units. So that's a pretty good baseline. So for any development that creates 10 or more units, 10% have to be affordable. But we do think in the areas around the transit centers, for example, where we're allowing much higher levels of density, that the developers probably can make things work with a little bit more set aside for affordable units. We think 15% is appropriate. Maybe we can push it to 20%.
Thank you for that.
Mark,
also thinking.
Let me just add up, sorry, Jen, that for Westport, they have a different affordable rental rate, don't they? And so they're able, since the construction costs are the same between Fairfield and Westport, but they have their rental basis is higher.
Sadly, you go over one town, and they're part of the Stanford-Norwalk MSA, and we're part of the Bridgeport MSA. So the rental rates, the fair market rents in Westport are higher than they are here, even though the markets perform very similar.
That's helpful to know. Thank you for that insight. I was also wondering if we upped the after we get a moratorium, if utilizing a higher inclusionary zone percentage would be a helpful tool to having a little more control over the development going forward. Just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're trying to engage the Planning and Zoning Commission with is right now it's you pretty much, if you're proposing a fairly substantial development, you're almost guaranteed to get an 830G application. So is there some acceptable middle ground that we can come up with that provides for less density than what you might otherwise see with an 830G project on appropriately sized sites, not everything, but offsetting that would be a slightly less stringent affordability requirement. So instead of 30% affordable, maybe you do 20%, as you said. So I think there's some other things that we might be able to do. That's part of what we're hoping that a planning consultant working with the Affordable Housing Committee and the Planning and Zoning Commission might be able to shed some light on as we develop our update to our affordable housing plan.
That's all very helpful. Thank you. Also, I just want to let you know, Kristen asked me to tell everyone she had to hop off for that other call, and she's sorry to miss the end of the conversation.
Yep. Thank you, Jen. Did I bore everyone to tears by now?
And I was looking to see this. Nothing more that I could think of. The annual report was submitted, and that's got some of the stuff we did last year.
Yeah, I did provide a copy of that. Obviously, the committee has that, and it's going to the RTM, but I did share a copy of that with our state legislative delegation so that they're aware of it. It does include a list of the action steps that were identified in the last affordable housing plan update and what we've done since then. So it's a really good barometer of the progress that this community has made, which is, I think, as several people have mentioned, should be a source of pride, because I think the town has done quite a bit. It may not show up in all the numbers, but we've been very creative in terms of trying to address this problem.
I would agree and really appreciate the update.
And the only other thing on that, the only other thing I will mention, Steve, and the committee and other members of the public, is that with respect to the affordable housing plan, I finally got it out of the purchasing department today, and so it will be hopefully the first selectwoman will sign the solicitation tomorrow, and it will be posted, and we expect responses by mid-March, so that we'll hopefully have a planning consultant on board by April, so we can begin this planning in earnest.
And Mark, that process of doing the update is going to be a 12-month process, maybe that longer?
Yes. Yeah, I think based on our last experience, in order to provide for meaningful public engagement, which I think is critical to getting buy-in and support for some of the initiatives, we need to at least provide for a 12-month planning process to do that.
Hi, Mark. This is Sheila.
Hey,
Hi,
Sheila.
Steve. Hi, everyone. I'm still here. I'm popping back on. I'm sorry. I'm a little involved in another state on vacation. But thank you, Mark. That's wonderful news. I'm glad we're ready to go with it's going to be an RFQ going out for a consultant for the affordable plan. That's wonderful. Look forward to the public engagement piece of that. So I hope we can all come together and with some questions and some ideas to put forth to start a conversation in order to prepare the new plan.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you for calling in from vacation, right?
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Well, happy to do it, and thanks to all our elected officials for joining us. We really appreciate it. Good to hear from all of you.
So, Mark, I don't have any more updates for our elected officials, and I don't know if Tony or Jen or Laura have questions, additional questions that we could address.
Steve, I'm more than happy to take questions from your members. If you have anything, it may not be anything related. If they have questions about what's going on in Hartford, we're happy to be a resource to them.
Well, I'll throw it open with that. If any of the committee members have a question, feel free to ask. All right. Hearing
I think
none.
I put them all. I think I put them all to sleep, Steve.
No,
Steve,
actually,
Joanne.
Mark, if I could have go ahead. I'm sorry.
Joanne.
Steve,
yes.
it's Joanne.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, good.
I think it would be beneficial if occasionally our state legislators could send us emails regarding the upcoming bills that affect us.
And Mark, I don't know if you get them directly. I'm sure that everything is posted on their individual websites. But it would be helpful.
I follow them, but I mean, it would probably be good if we knew where they stand periodically.
Yeah.
Joanne, I'd be happy to share with you. I would be happy to share with you our public hearing agenda on planning development. And in fact, next Friday, we have a public hearing scheduled. And I'd be happy to send to you through the committee a means to get to all the members the agenda with links to the bills and information. So happy to do that. And that's a very good point. I'm happy to do that.
I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, if Tony, if you want to send it to me, I'm happy to share it through our e-blast to the members of the committee.
You bet, Mark. I'll pull it together and I'll forward that to you because that'll be public tomorrow morning, and I'll send you the link to the website that people can register, submit testimony, and give their perspective, which is valued.
Great. And Tony, are those kinds of meetings on WebEx or Zoom?
They're on Zoom, and in fact, dare I even say, I'm simultaneously sitting in on a public hearing that's going on for 10 hours.
Well,
in public health.
They're actually very good. They're very good Zoom meetings. I've sat in on a couple of them, and they're very good. So I think it'd be great for us to periodically sit in on those hearings.
Okay.
But I'll definitely get that to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, maybe we return back to our regular agenda. Allow our elected officials to first thank them and allow them to get on to other business. You're free to stay on, of course, too, but my guess is you've got more than enough to do. But again, thank you, Tony, Laura, Jennifer. Appreciate it very much. And Jennifer, Joe, Kristen, of course, we say thank you.
And Steve,
Absolutely.
Thank you and all
Thank you
your
so much
committee
for
members
having us.
and Mark. And I really do want to acknowledge that what you do, and Steve, your long-standing service to the town. You know, I'm a huge fan, and you know the efforts of your entire organization is lauded by me throughout the state. So thank you, and for all your volunteer efforts, every single one of you. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Tony.
I would echo my thanks and congratulations to all of you for the great job that you have done and are doing for our town and for getting the accessory dwelling unit proposal through last night. So congrats on that, and look forward to continuing to work with you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay. Thank you all. So circling back then, going to the minutes. If I could get a motion to approve.
So moved.
And that is?
Joanne.
Joanne, thank you. And a second? I think that was
second it, Helene.
All right, Helene. Thank you, Helene. Are there any comments, corrections? And if not,
what's the second on that?
If we could, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those are approved. Thank you. Mark, I don't think we need to add anything more about the, well, I should ask, do we need to do anything more about the report to the RTM, the housing plan update, the ADUs, Parkview Commons, the trust fund? They've all been discussed.
No, we weave that into our conversation. I will follow up with you to determine your availability to join me at the RTM meeting next week and the week following, and hopefully we'll go from there.
Oh, yeah, I should let you know. I don't know when the RTM meeting is. Wednesday I get my first vaccination shot. So I don't know what condition I'll be in Wednesday night, but I don't think that's the meeting night. But
well, the good news is the committee meeting is the 16th, a Tuesday. And,
okay.
And then the RTM meeting is the following Monday. But they'll probably do most of the questions and discussion in committee. So the 16th would be the more important date if you can attend.
Good. Okay. Regarding the moratorium points, I did a little summary, and it may not be 100% accurate, but I think it's pretty close. And I just thought it was interesting, and I'll just run through a couple of things for you guys real quick. That on Mark's spreadsheet, there are 40 developments. 8 of them are inclusionary, 18 of them are 830G, 14 are others. The inclusionary have just over 900 units, so there's going to be 95 would be affordable, and that doesn't cost the town anything. And the town has some good input on the inclusionary developments, and so I think it was really key that the town was able to get that passed. 830G, 18 developments, 1,000 units, and 400 and change will be affordable. I don't know. How about the NOFA? The trust fund application. I know there are a couple of changes that have been made. Is it basically ready to go, Mark?
Well, what we talked about initially was just posting it through the website and not doing a whole lot of marketing for a while, which I think we could do, assuming there aren't any more changes. I did hear back from Carol Martin, and she indicated she thought it looked pretty good to her. She had some minor questions about how the restrictive covenants would work and the fact that some of the sometimes developers would like to apply for pre-development dollars, so there may not be something by which you can attach a lien or a note or some kind of securitization of the project. So I think those are all fairly minor details that probably could be worked out once we have applications to consider, specific sites or projects to consider. So I do have a conversation tomorrow with the development person that's associated with Connecticut Housing Partners. And I sent him a copy as well.
Good.
And so, if there's any other feedback, I'll certainly let everyone know. But I think, we can certainly post it, and then, if we hear of anyone, we can refer people to that, and at some point, then we can, ratchet up the marketing effort associated with it.
Speaking of Connecticut Housing Partners, and I know you're probably aware of this, they have a development they're working on in Monroe, senior housing, which is not on a sewer; it's on a septic. And at some point, we should have a discussion with them because we have parts of the town that might be appropriate for a development that doesn't have access to sewer, and so the septic might make it feasible, where otherwise it would not be. So we should keep an eye on that. That's about all I got. New business, if there is any.
Just apologize again for the technical difficulties we had tonight, but I thought it was a really great conversation with our state legislative delegation. They certainly shared a lot of information, and I'm hoping that, I'll follow up with Tony and Kristen and Laura and Jennifer to express our thanks, and then as Joanne and Steve suggested, a summary of pending bills would be helpful so that we can engage and provide feedback on those things that are being considered in Hartford. So I think that's great.
And this really should be part of our regular annual calendar. We should once or maybe twice a year meet with our elected officials, let them know what we're doing, and ask them what's happening up in Hartford. I think I sent around everybody. Herb did a nice little summary of the proposed changes to the ADU regs. We have to think about how we want to now move forward. If we want to try to design a program that might use trust fund monies or community development's Blackrock Fund. And Mark, do you know when the ADU regs will be finalized and be effective?
I don't know for sure, but I know Carrie has posed that question. I'll follow up with Jim and Emmeline, and as soon as I have an answer, I'll be sure to send that out to the committee. And the only other thing I would say is that there's also a marketing component to this too. With the change in the regs to make it easier for people to create accessory dwelling units, there's an opportunity for us to help market those changes and the opportunity that it presents to the community. So, Ridgefield has done something like that, and I know we've talked about that before, but that is another thing that we could be doing just to make sure that people are aware of these changes and how they could potentially take advantage of them.
And I believe one of the changes allows a separate structure in the AAA zone, and that's 2 acres. And I know of a house that has an apartment in their detached garage, not legal, and but it's not in an area that fits the new regulations. Do you have any idea if ZBA could help them if we wanted to bring them in out of the cold?
Well, I suppose ZBA is always an option if something doesn't squarely fit within the regulations. There's the question of hardship and whether or not they would meet that definition. It's a bit subjective. I know there was conversation with Planning and Zoning about potentially expanding that opportunity to other zones, and we really didn't want them to do that because that would require, at least at this time, would require another public hearing, because that would be a substantive change over what we had initially presented. So I do think there is some interest amongst the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at this, but I think this is a good start, and then we can gauge interest and possibly expand it to other zones if it proves successful.
And I think I sent around some info on housing stats, but the one that struck me as interesting is that 50 of the houses sold last year had ADUs in them. Just an interesting number. Back to the Housing Trust Fund, Mark, I don't think we've talked about a division between for-profit and not-for-profit. Not that I can recall. So if somebody came to us looking for pre-construction dollars and they were a for-profit entity, would we give them money?
These are the threshold questions. I don't have a strong sense of that. I mean, I think that's really up to all of you. I think what we've done is in the application, we've created some criteria by which we evaluate whether or not there's a sufficient public benefit for us to invest in the project. And that gives you, I think, quite a bit of latitude to make a decision as to whether or not it makes sense. So I think it's hard to do things in the abstract. That's why I think it almost makes sense to kind of put this up here on the website and certainly refer people to it if they make inquiries and have projects in mind, but maybe not go gangbusters in terms of marketing the program until we have a few applications under our belt and we can kind of work through some of these issues, because I don't really have a sense as to how you guys would evaluate that at this point. What are your priorities?
I personally am not in favor of it, but if it's a really good project,
exactly. The devil's always in the details, right? So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So when would you think you might be able to post it?
If it's okay, I'd prefer to wait until I hear back from. I'll certainly circle back with Carla. I won't wait forever, but I'll have this conversation with Steve Golick tomorrow. But if there's nothing major, I don't see why we can't post that in the next week or so. And I'll certainly let you know when we do that, so that if you're talking to people, you can point them in that direction.
Great. That would be great. So the last thing two last things. One is our next meeting is not February 10th, but it's March 10th. The other,
apologies.
Yeah. The other is, and I had shared with you a thought about when we do our update to the Affordable Housing Plan, how can we do outreach so that the groups least likely to participate in our charrettes and meetings, blacks, Hispanics, Asian population or Muslims. My recollection of all the meetings we had in the past there just wasn't any representation. And we really need to hear from as many diverse groups in town as we can. So I don't know how we are able to do that successfully. But I'd like to, any input you guys can give, I'd appreciate it.
I think that's a constant challenge with whatever we do. And, I mentioned several other planning efforts that we've undertaken where we've used a variety of other mechanisms by which we took the presentation or materials on the road or did pop-up events at places where people might congregate, because that's true of a lot of, working families or people with children. It's not always convenient for people to come out to a public meeting or to dial into a Zoom call for that matter. So, Sheila has mentioned doing a survey. I think we need to use all of these techniques to make sure we have broad representation. But despite that, I think you just need to have to make the opportunity available. It's not that it's guaranteed to produce an outcome, but you're certainly going to strive to get people involved in it.
Yeah. Okay, so my very last comment is that there's a new chocolate place in the commercial area in Greenfield Hill, and boy, is that good.
Very good. It's very good.
Where is it? Now you have
really
to share.
Good. Yeah. If you know where Banda restaurant is, it's right next door.
Oh, okay. I'll have to stop there.
It's a little spot. I don't know what it was before. Maybe a florist.
It was a yoga studio.
Yoga studio.
Oh, the yoga studio went out?
Yes, it did.
Oh.
Sorry to say.
Disappointing.
It's not cheap, but the chocolate is really, really good. So
you get what you pay
for Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Well, they're probably sold out already. Yeah.
Oh. I won't say that.
Hi, this is Helene. I have one question. We've talked about this in the past with the Housing Trust Fund hiring somebody to kind of oversee all of these applications and just making sure that these developers follow through. And, I'm just looking at the numbers, 90 units here, 91 there, 94, 40, 30. With 40 developments, this is becoming, we're going to have a lot of units that we need to keep track of. And I think it's interesting, and I'll share with you, because when Mark sent out the information about the Anchorage, I posted something, and actually a friend of mine contacted me and said, I'd really like to apply for that, for the affordable unit. And she's retired now on a fixed income. So she went to the site, and she said, wow, this is really, they're asking a lot of information. I said, I know, but just try to, make your way through it. And one of the comments she said was, they make it really hard, and then I wonder if it's already set up through friends who are getting these units in the overall thing. And I thought, well, gee, that's not the kind of thinking we want people to have when it comes to these units. So it would be nice if we could say, no, we keep track of these. We make sure that the Affordable Housing Committee makes sure that we're doing what these developers are doing, what they're supposed to be doing with 830G and inclusionary housing. Or have we given any more thought to hiring someone to oversee this?
Helene, I think it's a good point, because right now, the actual regulatory authority is structured so that the planning and zoning, the reports, the restrictive covenants are filed through the planning and zoning department. And typically what they do is they refer them to my office for review. And right now, as you mentioned, there's only a few of these developments. So, I'm reviewing a half a dozen annual reports to ensure that they're all meeting their requirements. But if everything on that page gets built, it is already getting to the point where it is difficult to do my other job, my regular job, and do that at the same time. So I do.
Mark, I don't know how you have time to do all you do. The more I get to know you and see what you do, I'm blown away by you. You seem to have your hand in so many different areas of the town. So, yeah, you're definitely going to need some help.
I
you're not going to be able to do all of it.
I think you're absolutely right, and it's not like I guess the closest thing to our resident expert here, but this is not something that I do full time. And so there might be other people that might, it might take them less time to do a more efficient job of reviewing these things than I do. So I think you're absolutely right. I think I see a point in the near future where we may have to tap into the housing trust or some other source to get some help to do these reviews, because it's important.
Yeah. And I apologize for this question if it seems like a dumb one. I should know the answer. But so when you go to a different, website, a new development that's, accepting applications, is the application exactly the same for every single developer, or do they kind of put their own spin on it? Do they, design it according to how they want it to look, or is it the exact same application every time for different developments?
It is not the same exact application, and so I review these for consistency with the affordable plan that they file with the Planning and Zoning Department, and to ensure that they're meeting the requirements. But there's a lot of flexibility beyond that. I mean, some people make it easier than others, and sometimes, in this case, they did take my suggestions to modify their marketing materials somewhat, but I can't wholesale rewrite their application materials each time. So I think it's a problem because even with our existing deed-restricted affordable housing units, everything is operated by a different owner-operator. So they all have their own application form and their own waiting list and their own application criteria and requirements. So unfortunately, what we tell people is you're going to have to put your name, you're going to have to make an application to each and every one of these. And wouldn't it be nice in an ideal world if you could do one and be on on everyone's list? But that probably won't happen because they were all financed differently, so they have requirements they have to meet with their funders.
Gotcha.
But it's not a good thing from a user standpoint.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, we good?
Again, my humble apologies for my technological deficiencies here. So I'll try to get this sorted out for the next one. I was getting too full of myself. I had 2 successful WebEx meetings, and clearly I missed something along the way. Yeah, apparently. So my apologies.
No worries, Mark. It all worked out.
Yeah, it's a little egg on my face. So
we can't see it. So
that's
a good
point. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you very much.
We need to make a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
We're adjourned at 8:49. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Night.